Quentin Tarantino. Whether you love him or you hate him, there's no denying that he has a true passion for what he does. Now, a lot of people have been quoted with saying that the best thing about Quentin Tarantino is also the worst thing about Quentin Tarantino, and that is that he fully believes in whatever it is he's doing. And I actually think that's a really great way to illustrate his style of filmmaking. Just believing. Tarantino has a very specific style, and I think it's very easy to pick up or see. Like, if you see one of his films, you instantly recognize that it's his work. But a lot of people just write Tarantino off as some bloodthirsty film freak with a foot fetish. But isn't that what makes him so awesome? I mean, maybe not the foot fetish part, but the fact that he's just so devoted to film. He is a movie geek, and if you've seen any of his interviews, you pretty much know that he is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to films. And I think that passion and love really does shine through all of his movies. So I'm here to talk about some of his most successful films and what makes Tarantino such a great director in the first place. And if you're wondering about the suit, I just thought I'd dress up a little bit for this video. I got it pretty cheap at a pre-owned store, but I was surprised about one little accessory that came with it, this revolver. I mean, it's odd. It seems kind of dangerous to... Now, the first film I want to talk about is probably Tarantino's most influential, Pulp Fiction. So this is a film that's impressive on so many levels, but probably the most noticeable one, in my opinion, is its dialogue. I would recommend this film to anyone who wants to know how to write or create very, very intriguing dialogue, because I do think that's the film's strongest aspect. Another impressive feature that this film boasts is its method of storytelling. Now, this is a film which its events happen out of order, but there's small little tidbits sprinkled throughout the film to kind of help people piece together the movie and what order of events actually happen chronologically, making it all the more interesting to watch. You could probably see this film over and over again multiple times and still see several things that you never noticed before. On top of all that are unique and interesting characters that go through changes and even learn life lessons, and some pretty awesome cinematography that includes a lot of nods and homages to other films of Tarantino's past. Which is a thing I want to get back to. Those nods and homages are a recurring factor in Tarantino's movies that I'll point out later. Plus, this movie has a really awesome soundtrack. Heck, I'd recommend it for the music alone, but there's so many other reasons to see this movie, so you really should watch it. It's a great film and still to this day considered one of Tarantino's best. Coming up next is Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2. Now, the reason I'm talking about both of these films is not really because they're a series of films, but more because I view these movies as just one giant picture. Now, it would be nice to get this all as one giant picture on DVD, but I digress. This is a movie that pretty much everyone recognizes. I mean, it's Kill Bill. It had such a huge impact on culture and movie culture as a whole. And I will say that this is probably the movie that people point to the most when they say that Quentin Tarantino's films are usually style over substance. And as far as this film goes, I can understand that. From its groovy 70s intro, and yes, I did say groovy, to its over-the-top samurai sword-wielding action, this movie is very flashy. Now, that's another thing, this film is violent. The blood is flowing in this film, folks. But I wouldn't let that be a turn-off to anyone. Like I said, the action is over the top. We're talking geysers of blood when heads are cut off, kicks, flips, and even at one point a samurai shish kebab. The action isn't really gritty or super realistic. It's just kind of fun movie action. This is a very fun, fast-paced film that is home to some, again, great music, and again, a lot of homages to other films that Tarantino was influenced by. This is also home to a great performance by Uma Thurman. She pulls off the role as the bride tremendously, and it's impossible to imagine anyone else taking her place. And as far as utilizing a strong female lead to star in your great film, I would say movies should take a bit more of this approach and a bit less of that approach. Now transitioning over to Volume 2. Now yes, as I said before, I do view these movies as one giant film. However, there are a lot of differences between the two. For example, Volume 1 tends to stick to a more fast-paced, flashy, action-packed style of film, while even showcasing the Japanese culture a lot, whereas Volume 2 has more of a slow-paced type style to it and even resembles a Western, and even pays homage to other Western films in the process. Another notable thing about this film is that it showcases our heroine's emotions and motives a bit more than the first film did. Now, with a few exceptions aside, Volume 1 usually tended to stick to more action than it did character building, and I think that's the area that Volume 2 shines the most out of these two films. More tensions rise through this film, and our main character's mission becomes more and more of a challenge as different obstacles kind of stop her in her path and make things more and more difficult as she goes along the way. Now, this film actually does give us a bit more backstory about Uma Thurman's character, which is kind of a risky thing to do if not pulled off right. But fortunately, the man behind the wheel knows what he's doing as far as directing goes, and he pulls off a very interesting backstory that actually progresses this movie's current story, so you're kind of killing two birds with one stone there. Both Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2 are very, very fun, fast-paced films that I find very enjoyable and rewatchable, so if you've got the time, definitely check these out. So the final film I want to talk about today is kind of a recent one, Django Unchained. Now this is actually a bit of a controversial film, at least at the time of its release, and I think that's mostly because of its kind of shaky subject matter, slavery. So yes, obviously this is a very serious subject, and people didn't really see Tarantino as the type of guy who could kind of handle this topic. They couldn't just imagine how such a stylistic and violence-oriented director could handle such a task. But I think when the final product was released, a lot of those fears were kind of put to rest. There's a clear fine line between who we should be rooting for and who we shouldn't be rooting for. The kind of brutal and evil violence is shown in more of a dark and gruesome manner that makes the audience very uncomfortable, whereas the heroic violence and action is shown in more of a heroic way, you know, more lighthearted and easier to root for. So I think they kind of balance those two out, keeping the kind of the gruesome violence gruesome, you know, and obviously something we shouldn't be rooting or cheering for, and the heroic violence as something we should be cheering for because it's for the greater good. Another thing that Tarantino is really known for is pulling a great performance out of an actor, and this movie is no exception. So I think the standouts here are Christoph Waltz and Leonardo DiCaprio, but that's not to say that all the other performances weren't outstanding as well. Kerry Washington, you know, Samuel L. Jackson, and Jamie Foxx all did an outstanding job. This is a fun, very well made film that is a fine addition to the Western genre. So, watch this movie for the great action and stay for the compelling story and unique characters. It's a great movie and you should definitely check it out. Well, that's all I have to talk about for now, but stay tuned for next time when I talk about the new film, Suicide Squad. Until next time, stay tuned.